I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. You're not long back from Ukraine.
No, back about 10 days now from the most recent trip.
So where did you go this time?
This time we were just actually at the warehouse, which is in western Ukraine, quite close to the Slovakian border. So we didn't travel too far in this time.
Now, there's an Irish connection with that warehouse.
There's a few Irish connections with the warehouse, I guess. The main connection is that C-Mark, which is the biggest cement company in Ukraine, is owned by CRH, which is a large Irish company, huge Irish global company. And it's through their introductions and assistance that we got that warehouse in Ukraine. So it's really helped us.
And how long were they out in Ukraine?
I believe they've been there for at least 20 years, decades. And again, it was very significant help to us because we had drivers and warehouses in place that we could trust to get our medical equipment and medicines right up to the front lines during the heat of the conflict. So they were local drivers that were well trusted and had been there for years and years.
Yeah, and Ukraine is massive.
Ukraine is huge. You get a sleeper train from Lviv to Kiev, and it's a 16-hour train journey that's only halfway across the country. So
do they use a lot of trains? That's still a good kind of method of transport. It is now, obviously, but
it is, which is surprising in its own right as well that it's not a bigger target for them. But thankfully, it isn't, and they are operating. And because of the distances that are involved, train travel around is vital, and it is.
So where do you fly into now? Do you still go to Poland and then have to cross the border?
Actually, where I used to go in from is Slovakia,
right.
And that's where I would have normally gone in and out. It tends to be a little bit quieter than the Polish border, but I've gone in and out through Poland as well. So it just depends on where you're going to get to Kiev. Probably the entrance via Poland is easier because you can get a sleeper train right up, but it just depends on where you're going.
To concentrate the minds for people who are listening, there's no flights going into Ukraine, obviously.
No, absolutely not.
There's been a war going on since February 2022, which a lot of us really have forgotten, or we sort of, I think, flick through the pages now. We've become used to it.
Yeah, and it is, it pushes back in its consciousness, but it is, I was in Budapest relatively recently, and that's only a 3-hour drive from the Ukrainian border. So like this is not quite the heart of Europe, but it's certainly not far from the heart of Europe. And there is a horrific war being waged over there against a peaceful people on an ongoing basis. So it does drift back, and other crises pop up. What happened in Libya and Morocco, for example, is horrific. But this is going on a daily basis. It doesn't stop. It's there. There's attacks taking place now, and there's people dying over there now through no fault of their own. They didn't ask for this. They didn't want this, and it was just thrust upon them.
And to go back to the warehouse, because in a way that's where it starts. Because I think you were in Ukraine just shortly before the war broke out in February 2022. And you had obviously some connection with the place. You liked it? You just... Or it was so fresh in your mind, was it, and the people you had met?
Yeah, it was fresh in my mind. We had an African business, and we were talking to a Ukrainian bank about a sale of that business. So I'd gone over to Ukraine, or to Kiev for the first time just before the war. Kiev was vibrant. It was a lovely place. They weren't expecting the invasion to happen. Yes, there'd been all the talk about the build-up on the border, but they were their near neighbours, their brothers. They're the same. They would consider them their brothers and sisters. So they thought it was saber rattling, that there would be some concessions, and that this would calm down again. But little did they know, a couple of weeks later, that a full-scale invasion was launched. When the invasion happened, I reached out to a friend of mine, Ray Jordan, who was the CEO of Goethe at the time, to see if I could help. And I ended up very quickly on the Slovakian-Ukrainian border, trying to put infrastructure in place to get aid into Ukraine through them. And it took legs from there. Initially, we put a warehouse in place in a place called Nicola in western Slovakia, close to the Ukrainian border. We brought over supplies from Garda Síochána. They came over with a fleet of aid in the early days.
Was it medical aid they were bringing?
Yeah, medical aid that they had organised, and the Gardaí came over with it themselves, which was fantastic to see, and a great testament to the Gardaí and to Ireland itself, that they drove across Europe with this convoy of aid. And I guess that helped us very significantly in the early days, because it proved our model. We had a warehouse in Western Slovakia. We could then use truck drivers from inside in Ukraine to come out, collect the aid, and then bring it into the far reaches of Ukraine.
So in the beginning, there was a lot of generosity, and from here, there always is. I think Ireland responds really well to humanitarian crisis. I noticed there, I think it was today or yesterday, that we are the biggest givers to the what do you call that thing, Clodagh? You know, when the GoFundMe, sorry.
Yeah.
So we're some of the biggest givers to GoFundMe, which is a totally unregulated place to earn money. But we tend to be very generous when something's happening. And of course, everybody was. There was people collecting, blankets. There was people doing whatever they could initially when it happened. But that has to die off, and I'm sure it becomes more organised, more political, the giving. And obviously it's the big political donations that really make a difference. But on the ground, do people very soon sort of pull back and feel they've done what they've done? You're still there, obviously, but others...
Yeah, I think there's still a huge amount of generosity towards Ukraine, and I think that's vital. They are under unprovoked attack, so and from my perspective, they are fighting a battle on all of Europe's behalf from a Russian aggressor perspective. So there still is, in fairness, significance. This morning, I just met with a team from UCD that are going over to train first responders there in terms of life-saving trauma first aid, and they're going over to Kiev to train locals on it. So there's still a huge amount of generosity, particularly coming from Ireland, but it does fade from the front pages, and it does fade from the front pages quite quickly. So you would have seen a huge amount of activity in the early stages, and that does die away. But there's still a steady stream of people that are trying to help out over there, which is great to see.
And the bigger picture, I suppose, is trying to put in place almost a business model, which you have done, in order to get the most amount of aid in the most efficient way and to the right places. So you sort of have applied your own business mind to this humanitarian effort to get the medical supplies, and you're also putting in basically sort of mobile operating theatres. Is that what they are?
Yes, they are. We've put in 15 clinics in a can, which are effectively operating theatres within a 20-foot container, which will contain all of the equipment necessary to deal with a full trauma. Everything from defibrillators to X-ray equipment to a full operating theatre as such. So we've moved in 15 of them, which have acted as triage centres on the front line, or as backup or replacements for hospitals that have been shelled or bombed or destroyed by the Russians. So, and
they've come in from the States, from a separate charity organisation that have sort of partnered with you in the use of the warehousing and the transport system to get them.
Because of the infrastructure that we've been able to put in place and proving the model with Garda Síochána, as I've said, we were able to take in a charity called Heart to Heart from the US. We brought them into Ukraine. We showed them around. We introduced them to some of the local administrators. We showed them our warehouses, our infrastructure. And because of that, then they trusted us with the delivery of a significant amount of pharmaceutical supplies. Initially through Goethe, there was about 40 million that was delivered, and now through One for Humanity, we've delivered about 5.1 million and another 3.1 million on the way. So we were able to scale it, and as you said, we have set it up as a business, as low cost as possible. We've piggybacked our infrastructure on, we're using warehouses that don't belong to us over there, and we're using infrastructure that doesn't belong to us. We have a couple of full-time staff, but that's our only overhead. Myself and Norman Sheehan, who co-founded the charity with me, are our volunteers. We're paying all of our own costs. So we've effectively got a low-cost, high-impact model, so that anything that's donated to us goes directly to the people that need it in Ukraine. And I guess that's what what I want to scale and what I want to continue to do, because it makes the biggest impact for the least amount of cost.
It seems to have sort of happened almost very quickly in your mind, how you went from kind of offering your help, which was physical help, really, you were doing. Initially, you were saying, okay, you had this warehouse and you could help move the stuff. But how did you sort of flip that into a business, or, well, not a business, we'll call it, a charitable organization so quickly?
I guess that's the entrepreneurial part of me. You look at, and I suppose I've been involved in business for a number of years. So you look to scale a business opportunity. And again, this obviously isn't a business opportunity. It's a humanitarian organization, but I look to scale it as quickly. So how do you scale this as quickly as possible? And how you scale it is by using existing infrastructure, by using existing contacts, and keeping the costs, as I was saying, as low as possible. So yes, I suppose you get ambitious in terms of how you approach the task, and it's been very satisfying to be able to see that. And then the people on the ground are just so appreciative of what you're doing. The more you do, the more you want to do, and it just pulls you in. And I've heard of international people coming back from Ukraine. They could have helped out in the front lines, they could have been injured, but they immediately want to go back and help, because you just get sucked into it and trying to assist, and the feel good of helping out is.
And no doubt that's because of what you see. And, some things that you see won't leave you in situations like that. When you were there first and you went back, having been there as a business person, talking to a bank, everything is just so normal, modern society. And you go back in and all of a sudden Ukraine is dragged back to the dark ages, what feels like the dark ages of a war. What sort of things affected you that you saw?
It's little things. It was completely chaos and mayhem when I went back the second time. Obviously, there was millions of people literally streaming across the borders and trying to get out of Ukraine. I guess the simple things, the families breaking up at the border was the hardest thing, and it's still the one that sticks to me most. Typically, the men can't leave Ukraine. Anybody of fighting age, over 18 and under 60, have to remain in Ukraine. So they were accompanying their wives and children to the border, and you typically have two kids literally holding on to their fathers for dear life, and the father was having to pull them off them and head back to fight or to complete uncertainty. So it was just horrific to see it. And that's, that wasn't just once, twice, 10, hundreds, thousands. It was, hundreds on a daily basis for a long time. So it's families being ripped apart and communities being ripped apart.
And people who weren't soldiers. I mean, these were not soldiers. These were people from all sorts of different professions. And
yeah, absolutely.
Violence and war is a strange thing to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the nicest people, and particularly early days in the war, we had a food station on the Ukrainian side of the border. You'd sit down with these guys, give them a cup of coffee or a bowl of soup while they were crossing. And when they were with their wives and their children, these are lovely people. An hour later, when their wives and children are gone, these guys are, they're transformed in that hour to, why us, and why, this aggression, why did it come down on us? And it transforms them, and that they've got to fight for. And I was just about to say fight for their country. They're not fighting for their country. They're not fighting for Ukraine. They're fighting for their wives, their mothers, their sisters. You hear and see the atrocities that have been committed by the Russian troops, or Russian prisoners in a lot of cases. The Wagner Group emptied the prisons and emptied those prisoners into Ukraine to do their damnedest. And they did do their damnedest. And if you think the Ukrainians are fighting for their country, they're not. They're fighting because of what's happened to their wives, their children, their daughters, their brothers, their sisters. So, they are going to fight.
And they will fight until they, there's no end in sight at the moment by the looks of things. I mean, it seems to be at a deadlock, is it?
Yeah, it appears to be. It's ground, I have to say, from what I've seen in Ukraine, it has been transformed since the start of the war. When we went in first, the health service was requisitioned by the army to fight the war. All of the able-bodied men were being called up. So that left a lot of deficits in terms of infrastructure over there. But now that's been completely transformed. The country is back as a functioning country. I was in Kiev, the bars, restaurant, nightclubs, they're all open and operating. Odessa, we were there about a month ago, and again, the restaurants. It's a beautiful city, and it's operating as a vibrant city again. I just spoke just before coming in here. I just spoke to my contact Vadim in Odessa, and he was saying the sun is shining, it's beautiful weather, everybody's back swimming in the Black Sea.
They're back
which is-
swimming.
which
So
is-
have
yes.
they tried to, because they kind of closed down that whole idea that is such a seaside city, a harbour that hasn't been in use. And there was a time that people couldn't get into the water because they were afraid of the mines that had been left
Yeah,
behind.
it wasn't that they closed it down; it was that it had to have been closed because of the dam that was bombed by the Russians. That swept a lot of mines, animals' bodies into the Black Sea, and because of the mines, they had to take their time in clearing that. So while we were there a month ago, the seafront was vibrant and the weather was beautiful, but there was nobody in swimming. But thankfully, as I was saying, I just spoke to Vadim and they're saying the sun is shining and they're back
Right.
swimming. So it's sort of
the
surreal.
resilience of humanity as well, isn't it? All everywhere around you.
Absolutely, you have to get on with it. In terms of they're now faced with this for well over a year and a half at this point.
Yeah.
And there's no end in sight, as you said. It seems to have.
Can you see the Russian warships out on the horizon? Are they much further away than that?
No, they would be further away from that. But from Odessa, you can see the occupied areas, and you go slightly further east, and you're into Kherson. And one side of Kherson is Russian controlled, or one across the bridge, across the river, is Russian controlled, and then the western side is Ukrainian controlled, and they're constantly firing backwards and forwards over that. So it's
And Odessa would have been, it's modern obviously, but it would have been a place where you could sit and watch the cruisers were pulling in, and there must have been ships dotted out there.
Yeah.
Yachts and everything that you see.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't there before the war, but even now during the war, it's an absolutely beautiful city. It reminds me of Vienna. It's got a lovely architecture. The parks, the seafront. It's a modern, bustling coastal town with a great history. And that's starting to reemerge in what is a completely surreal circumstances. And again, you get lulled into a sort of a false sense of security. While we were there, we went to see some of the buildings, the cathedral, for example, and that cathedral was bombed the following week. So you think you're miles away from it, but it can change very, very quickly over there, unfortunately.
So as regards medical, because you have people, I mean, the Americans think 500,000 people have been killed, Ukrainians, and 500,000 people killed and injured. The Ukrainians would suggest more like 100,000. What does it matter? There's a huge amount of people that have been killed and injured, and the injuries must be horrific. I mean, you're talking about injuries from mines, from rocket grenades, all sorts of stuff. So the military took over the hospitals, right? And they had to do that. And then they sort of moved these frontline sort of mobile units almost to deal with the frontline soldiers who were in the absolute firing lines. But behind that, you have people, citizens living normal lives who still need normal medical care. And you obviously have the more minor injuries that don't need that frontline care. So how are they operating? How are they coping with that? I mean, how have they got enough doctors, enough surgeons? I mean, our own hospital system here is in such a mess and so strange that we can't cope, and we're not dealing with a war. So
I guess the short answer is that they don't. There is deficits in terms of care that they can provide. In Kherson, for example, that was occupied by the Russians for a significant period of time, and there was no cancer treatment continued during that time. So they've a build-up of issues like that. As you said, a lot of the medical system has been requisitioned by the army, and they're trying to backfill that as quickly as they can. But that takes time and it takes resources. So there is significant deficits. Our most recent distribution of medical aid in Ukraine has been in the west of the country, simply because there's a significant internally displaced population that have had to move from the east over to the west, and the health system is creaking at the seams as it is. As I think I mentioned earlier, I know UCD are involved in trying to support the medical system in Odessa in terms of trying to provide some training, specialist training for injuries, and also trying to assist in terms of education of the next set of students that are coming through, because
they're most likely being rushed through, I'm sure, are they, the system, to try and get more and more doctors or anybody who can nursing as well.
I think you need they need to go through their time there, but I think that the problem is that the trainers are being taken away and they're being moved to the front line. So I think that leaves a deficit of trainers that are left behind. So hopefully Western
government. And those injuries, Shane, they require a huge amount of, each injury must require a huge amount of medical assistance. It's not just patch somebody off, up and out they go. These are long-term care plans that need to be put in place for people.
Yeah, and it's I guess it's just coping at this moment in time. But but the amount of loss of limbs is huge in Ukraine, unfortunately. And that's, as you said, that's not something you can stick a Band-Aid on. It's something that requires retraining, but that's going to take years, decades to try and work through. Also, the psychological impact of being in a war over there is going to take decades to fix, even if the war stops tomorrow. And unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any signs of the war stopping tomorrow. But you would hope, and there's a lot of positives too. There is a lot of goodwill. There's a lot of people trying to help, but they require that and so much more.
So did you sort of ever find yourself, had you ever kind of gone into any of these conflict zones before this, or this was just landed on you and you've obviously managed to bring your business mind to it and create something that is being a huge help to people in medical need? And we'll go through some of the medications that you're sending out, because there's an interesting list of stuff there. But which I suppose shows the needs, which aren't just kind of emergency, are they? They're the sort of long-term cancer needs and everything else that's going on in the population. But were you completely shocked by what you'd seen, or had you been to sort of places of conflict before?
Not necessarily of conflict, but we had taken 20 staff to Haiti to work in Haiti a number of years ago as part of giving back to the company business. We went out to Haiti with 20 staff worldwide to work on a farm there.
That's the Oxygen 8 group you're talking about.
Yeah, we took 2 staff from each of different offices, 10 different offices, and went and worked on a farm in Haiti for Soul of Haiti, another Irish charity, a number of years ago. That was eye-opening. Haiti is quite a scary place in terms of the poverty levels there, the violence levels there and things. So that was certainly eye-opening. I have spent a bit of time in Africa as well, in some beautiful countries, but also some less than beautiful countries in Africa. So I would have had some experience from that. But yeah, for Ukraine to be right on our doorstep, to be the center of Europe, not quite the center of Europe, as I was saying, but it's a 2.5 hour flight from Dublin to there. So it's not. It
sounds to me, though, you didn't have much time to think about it. You happened to have been there. You offered help, and all of a sudden saw an opportunity to really properly help. Because this is millions we're talking that you have managed to filter through into the health system there.
Yeah, and again, that it was never designed and never set out to go that way. But you go and you try and help in whatever way you can. And luckily enough, we had, through business contacts and through some rugby contacts, we got involved with CRH CMARC and were able to scale it quite quickly, and then able to work with
I love this scale it. I must start using this in my. I must start doing some of that, actually.
It's probably one of my business words that my kids would give out to me for.
We could all do with scaling it. I can tell you, we could all do it.
But yeah, it's literally trying to help. And even at the start, as I was saying, we were there trying to give out soup and coffee on the Ukrainian side of the border, and was very happy doing that, because you get such a feel good of trying to help them individually on the ground. So that to me is no different than what we did elsewhere. It was just that we were able to do it because of the circumstances that we were presented with. And the Americans, in fairness to them, have shown huge support over in Ukraine, and working with Heart to Heart International has been an absolute godsend from our side.
So how did you get an introduction to them? Was that through Norman Sheehan? And maybe we'll just go through a bit of his background. He's a risk management specialist. He's from Cork, yeah?
Yeah, Norman is from Cork, and a lifelong humanitarian.
We'll forgive him for that bit. You're from Limerick now, so you're not much further off.
Yeah, I don't know if I can forgive him from being from Cork, but we do have constant banter backwards and forwards between the two of us. But yeah, he's a lifelong humanitarian. He's got some stories. He's been in Mogadishu. He's been in some of the scariest spots at the scariest times around the world, and has dedicated his life towards humanitarian efforts. He was the operations director of Goal. He's been involved in humanitarian organizations all of his life. How
did you guys meet then?
Through Goethe.
Ray Gordon.
Yeah, to Ray Jordan.
Jordan.
He reached out to Ray, and he had been doing some work with the charity Heart to Heart in the US, and he made the introductions and flew over with the executives from Heart to Heart and traveled around Ukraine and saw then what we had put in place. And what we had put in place in a short period of time in a war zone was, it was enabled us to deliver the medicines, which was obviously, with the lack of infrastructure at the time, was a big positive.
So Heart to Heart are a big American charity. Did they raise funds through corporately, or?
They would raise funds through corporately. They would raise funds through church organizations. They're a broad-based organization. So a lot of the medicines that we would distribute in Ukraine are coming from some of the largest pharmaceutical companies. Johnson & Johnson, Teva, for example, would have agreements with Heart to Heart where they donate medicines, and those medicines are then we would effectively take orders from hospitals in Ukraine and try and match up those orders with the medicines that are available in Heart to Heart. Again, we're not getting...
And are they transporting them from the States, or are they sourcing them, like, are any of the medicines coming from here?
No, none of them are coming from here. They're all being transported
and shipped.
Into Vienna, flown into Vienna, and then we truck them from Vienna into Ukraine, and then using our infrastructure in Ukraine, deliver them out around Ukraine. The hospital units would have actually come from the US, but we're now working on a European solution. So we're hoping to deliver more hospital units that are sourced from Europe, specifically from Amsterdam, so that they're closer, so that we can literally just drive them in.
Not so expensive, obviously, to transport them.
Not so expensive,
something like that.
And you don't have obviously when you're talking about big hospital units, they can't be flown. They've got to be brought on ships. So it's just there's a significant time lag. So there's a cost and time lag associated with that.
So what sort of medicines are they sending, and do you send an order, or do they basically send you what they have? I'm sure it's a lot more organised than that.
We try to marry it up, I guess. So we would visit, and we visited quite a few frontline hospitals in Ukraine. Yeah, and they would tell us what they need, and then we try to marry that up with what's available. We don't provide everything that we would like to the hospitals, simply because we don't have that stock. But we have provided anything from HIV meds, anxiety drugs, blood pressure meds, antidepressants, heart medicines. So we would speak to the hospitals, see what they require, and then try to match that up with what's available. I would love to be in a position where we're providing everything to them, but unfortunately we're not in that position at the moment. And I would like to work with other Irish-based pharmaceutical companies that could hopefully fill some of those gaps. And obviously in Ireland, we do have a huge number of international pharmaceutical companies, and I would love to try and work with them to fill more of the needs over there. And again, in certain instances, these are and some of the medicines that we would provide would be, 18 months expiry dates. So they're not medicines that can be readily sold by these pharmaceutical companies. So we can get them over there, get them in place very quickly, and add significant value back.
So is the normal sort of import, or whatever you would call it, of the medicines completely stopped? And are they just wholly reliant on charities like your own to bring them in, or is there some sort of normal business going on within the hospitals?
No, there is normal business going on, and
it's just an extra need.
It's an extra need, and obviously there's martial law in Ukraine, so the front line and the troops are taking priority over what's there at the moment. They are filling in the gaps behind that as best they possibly can. But you can imagine there's such needs across the whole country that they need as much as they can get as such in relation to it. And then obviously you have a far higher requirement for antidepressants,
And anxiety pills, I can
anxiety
imagine.
pills, and
Yeah.
and everything, and and even, as I said, on the western side of the country, it's got twice the population that it had pre-war, and it probably didn't have adequate medical infrastructure there prior to that, and then it's been removed by the army, so you've got a huge amount of additional population with a diminished amount of capability to deliver medical treatment. So they need as much as they can get.
And like, how do people that you've spoken to on the ground, the Ukrainians, how do they feel about the Russians? Is there a hatred there, or are they sort of numb to that because they're trying to survive?
They're a mixture of both is the honest answer. It's funny, when I went to Ukraine before the war, Russian was the language that they did business in, and a significant portion of the population would have only have spoken Russian. But now everybody is trying to speak Ukrainian. They don't want to speak Russian. As an example, Kiev is the Ukrainian pronunciation of the capital, and if you say Kiev now, you are quickly corrected. In Kiev,
Better
Odessa.
make sure I don't say that.
Odessa is spelt with one S in Ukrainian, but two S's in Russian. So you spell it with two S's now, you'll be quickly corrected on it. And it's just, these are their near neighbors. These are their, their brethren. These are, it's like our relationship with the UK. I mean, they can't understand how that they have, or why that they're committing such atrocities against them. These are their brothers, their sisters. Everybody knows or has relatives that are in Russia. This is they're close neighbors. So it's barbaric what's going on.
And what about some of those? I mean, Russia has been accused of war crimes. I know that certainly they've been accused of mistreating some of the prisoners of war, but also, as we were talking before you came on, they have targeted hospitals. Was one of the first things they targeted. They've targeted coffee shops. They've targeted places where are purely civilian.
Yeah, indiscriminate attacks on civilian infrastructure is a war crime, and it's clear that they have done that since day one in the war. The medical infrastructure has been hit hard from day one. I've been to tens, if not hundreds, of hospital and medical facilities that have been attacked. They're not stray bombs. They have been deliberately targeted, which is a war crime. And the systematic targeting of civilian infrastructure is a crime against humanity. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Russians are guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. It's widespread right across the country. It's not a loose bomb or anything like that. These have been deliberately targeted, and they've deliberately targeted the power infrastructure as well to make life as tough as they possibly can for the everyday Ukrainians, so that they would leave Ukraine and put pressure on the EU by.
It's hard to believe, to sort of comprehend, really, how so many people can involve themselves in that kind of, from a Russian point of view. Okay, soldiers. I know soldiers they're following orders, etc. But where is their humanity?
Well, again, and I mentioned it, I think, at the start, is the first thing that the Russians did was empty their prisons of murderers, rapists, and sent them as soldiers to Ukraine. They're not soldiers. They're not men of honor in terms of following a profession. They are criminals that were just unleashed onto a.
I'm sure there's some horrendous stories, is there?
Horrific.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah. And they went into villages and.
They went into villages. We met girls coming out that had swapped friends for safe passage. How do you leave a friend behind? How do you swap a friend for?
Are these rural villages or?
That one, that was Mariupol. That those girls were coming from. So that's a big city, a big cosmopolitan city.
Right.
But how quickly it deteriorates. Irpin and Bucha, which would be the equivalent of Blackrock and Dalkey in Dublin, and that close to Kiev, they were occupied. And some of the stories that have coming from there is just absolutely horrific. The mass graves in Izium, I visited that the trip before last. So what's going on over there is just butchery and barbaric. But again, I'm not questioning any of the normal Russians. I don't believe that they want this war. I believe that there is a mafia Don that's running a criminal organization at the top of it, and I don't know how else to say it, but that's what's happening. And if you don't toe the party line, you're thrown out of a window, and your jet is shot down or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's a brutal totalitarian regime which is inflicting atrocities on a near neighbor and country.
And like Ukraine always have, their narrative has always been it could be anybody. Like we are, it's Ukraine they've targeted, but you can see certainly Finland, also on the border with Russia, is obviously always had a big military because it was on the border with Russia. But you can see that, or you can feel the nerves there that,
I've no doubt. I've no doubt in my mind that Ukraine was just merely the first stopping point. The Russians already have troops stationed in Moldova and are claiming an area of Moldova as their own. Had their attack of Ukraine succeeded, I have no doubt that they would have linked up with Moldova, which is connected to it.
Yeah.
They've already threatened Lithuania in terms of a land bridge into Kaliningrad, which is a Russian enclave in northern Europe. Had they got away with the invasion of Crimea, they got away with attacking areas of Donetsk and Luhansk a number of years ago, and we're just building up again. So I think had Ukraine fallen as quickly as expected, they would have continued.
Had they not fought as hard as they did and continued to do so,
absolutely,
where could we be now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a part of the reason why I'm involved in it, I have two sons in their early 20s, and if we didn't take action against this, it would be up to them is sort of how my mind went in relation to that. So it's this is a war against Europe.
Is there still a positive feeling on the ground then? You talk about the cities are kind of coming back to life. They are back to life. They seem to be very resilient in how they can get their infrastructure back. Their people are resilient. You see them in war zones all the time. First ones back out are usually the guys with the coffee trucks, and they get them up and running no matter what, and people all of a sudden start behaving normally. And there's a healing to that, I think. But they seem to be a particularly resilient population.
They are. They're incredibly resilient. As I said, the infrastructure is back up. It's been repaired all the way along in Kiev, should I say, correcting myself.
You'd be down as Russian, then you'd be chucked out.
In Kyiv, you'd be hard pressed to find a damaged building. They're repairing them as they go along. They're building new roads, up to a couple of meters or a couple of kilometers from the front line. The farmers are planting up to a couple of kilometers of the front line. There is a resilience in them. There is a weariness definitely there as well that you can see, but there's also hope. And I did mention earlier about the breakup of family, and one of the happiest things that I saw on one of the last trips that I was there was a family being reunited. I was on a bus in through Ukraine, and I saw a father coming off and embracing his wife and children that he hadn't obviously seen for a while. So it's nice to see that there's there is people returning, and there is, and from a European perspective, we've got to try and facilitate that.
We do, and we have to keep it in mind that those who are here for shelter, and most of them probably do want to go home and don't particularly want to be here at all.
Absolutely.
And we have to remember that. And also do what we can as a country, as a rich country, as you say, particularly the pharmaceutical industry here. Is there any of them that have excess medicines that will be just past their sell-by date for here and wherever else they can export to? But they would be welcome in a country in need. And I presume also there's other businesses that operate here that... Do we have bandages? Do we have things like we probably do?
Yeah, tourniquets is actually a big one, and it's a funny one. I find myself getting an education on tourniquets now, which is something I never thought.
Do Irish hospitals run out? Do we have to very much watch the sell-by on everything? I mean, have they got access?
I think on something like tourniquets or other stuff like that it's there isn't a huge requirement, thankfully, for that in our country at the moment. So that's maybe something a simple one. But yes, anything that we can do to support is required. So from medical supplies is the area that we focused on because that's where we felt we could make most difference. But there's other significant requirements in terms of,
and not food. Food never was the requirement, was it? Because Ukraine has such a massive food industry.
Yeah, in the early days, food I think was a requirement because the whole infrastructure had broken down.
Yeah.
The whole supply chain had broken down. But now, no. The Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe, and you can see it traveling around. They've got beautiful sunshine and rain, so they've got perfect growing conditions, and it's actually an issue in Africa now because the grain and other foodstuffs that they would have supplied to third world countries is now not coming out. So
there was it stopped. Is it back running again or?
There was a grain deal with Russia which facilitated a significant.
So Vladimir Putin can say whether or not Africa gets fed.
Exactly, and does, and because of their petrochemical industry, can also decide whether they have fertilizer or not. And if you support or if you don't speak out against Russia, you'll get fertilizer. If you do speak out against Russia, your fertilizer is cut off. So yes,
you'd have to wonder, about the world. How do we end up like this?
Yeah.
How the hell do we end up, with one individual, I suppose, and those under him, dictating so much?
Yeah, I guess from what I've seen, you see the best and the worst of humanity. You see the worst of humanity and what's happening in terms of the attacks and what atrocities are being orchestrated. But you see the best of people also going in and trying to help and putting themselves in harm's way to try and to help other people. We're operating mainly in the western side of the country, which is relatively safe. But you've got NGOs that are right up to the front lines, and you have aid workers being killed on an ongoing basis. And we work with a number of medical charities over there that are working right up, including an organisation called Step In, which are late 20s, early 30s. Medical professionals who are giving their time and energy to helping over here, where they could be earning the big bucks elsewhere. So you see the best and worst of humanity. But yes, there is a you despair sometime in seeing what's going on and over there.
When you get these successful businesses up and running, right? Do they just run themselves then? Does it all just flow really neatly and you can just stand back and?
No, never. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. And actually, we've set up successful business in markets, and we've been unfortunately subject to frauds in those. So you've got to, like anything else, you've got to put your time and effort and continually building it and continually growing it. We've been lucky as a business in that we've got some fantastic management teams in place, and they've gotten rid of me, so they're running the businesses themselves. But that's because they've been taken on by other people, and hence why I've got a little bit more free time to go into other things.
As many things that sound too good to be true are myths. But anyway, what about, I suppose, finally, this blueprint that you've created in the Ukraine? Could it be sort of transported elsewhere to other parts of the world that you've?
Yes, and I'm certainly looking at that for different areas. So, for example, Kenmare Resources would be an Irish company which is based out of Mozambique. They have warehouses, trucks, ships, and facilities in Mozambique. And I've had initial conversations with them about working with them to bring aid into northern Mozambique, which has a troubled history and a troubled present, unfortunately. So there's examples of that. Those discussions are at early stages. We've got focus on Ukraine at the moment, but it is something that we feel we've got a very low-cost, volunteer-driven organisation which enables the aid to get to the end user in a very, very cost-efficient, cost-effective way using existing infrastructure. So if we could replicate that in other areas.
Would you like to be just doing it full-time?
I would, but unfortunately.
You have a thing called a job.
Yes.
And I never asked you about the rugby, for goodness sake. Everybody's listening here totally forgot about this little aspect of your life. The rugby. Who's going to win, by the way?
The excitement is building in terms of Ireland. They look like a complete outfit at the moment, and they've such strength and depth. If you look at the first 15 are incredibly strong, but the next 15 that are coming behind them in terms of replacements are also incredibly strong. So you can't but get excited about this World Cup. And they seem to be, going about it in the right way.
Are you still involved in it?
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all. Spectating,
Yeah.
having a beer and watching it and shouting on from the sidelines.
Do you miss it?
You would. I would have played a lot. I've played professionally for a few years, so you get, it seeps into your blood as well. So when you step away from that initially, there's a huge gap in your life, and you try and fill it with other different things. And
well, you've certainly been successful at that. So do you old timers kind of get together then and have your beers and?
Not as much as I'd like to, but yes, we do.
You should have said to me, I'm not a goddamn old timer. Well, look, Shane Leahy, thank you very much.
Nicola, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you very much for having me on to talk.